Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. So it's no secret that clerics are some of the absolute most powerful characters in Baldur's Gate. Whether you need damage, control, healing, tanking, support, buffing, debuffing, clerics do everything exceptionally well. They make a phenomenal addition to any party because they can fill pretty much any role, and they do so with incredible ease and facility. Some creators have gone so far as to say they're mandatory for every party, and while I wouldn't go quite that far myself, clerics are obviously incredible. However, when Larian released their statistics for what people play as characters, clerics were the least popular class to play as your custom main character. There's a bunch of different reasons for this, but one reason is that there is one thing that clerics don't do as well as other characters, and that is skill access. Clerics do not get great access to dialogue skills, they typically don't want to take high charisma, and they don't get that many skills in general, so they can be a more difficult choice as a role-playing option for your main character because of their low skill access. Or is any of that true? As it turns out, clerics are just as good at that as they are at everything else. And so today we're going to be looking at the cleric subclass that truly does everything Knowledge Domain Cleric. This class is very rarely recommended in optimization build guides in my experience, and I have not previously done a guide for it. But Knowledge Domain not only allows your cleric to be an incredible main character, making a perfect main character cleric or a Shadowheart origin run, it also, by giving you a ton of skill access and great facility to do whatever you want the character to do, it also gets a really excellent set of class features and spell selection, giving you even more control and doubling down on the things that already make Cleric incredible. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Casual Nerd Alert for the $10 donation, Josh Hobbs for the $2, John Watts for the £2, and Project Haffleden and Bobby Britt for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. Alright, let's get knowledgeable. I'm using Shadowheart as the example character here, because of course this is a cleric build, and I think it makes an excellent Shadowheart origin build, allowing her to perform as a main character and in conversation just as well as in combat. If you're building this as a custom character, of course you get all the great benefits of being a main character as well, and will be able to pass all the dialogue checks that you need. The best races for this include Githyanki, because the Knowledge Domain's Knowledge of the Ages class feature and the Githyanki's Astral Knowledge class feature both can be active at the same time, giving you all of the knowledge, all of the skill proficiencies of 2 whole attributes, which can be 9 different skills that you gain access to from those 2 abilities by itself, allowing you to cover every single skill that your party needs. In addition, the extra once per day Misty Step from Githyanki is very powerful. Other great picks include Wood Elf, because the bonus movement speed and perception proficiency, again, give you more access to skill coverage. And Halfling, because the ability to reroll ones will allow you to maintain concentration on your saves, and also let you perform much better in dialogue, because you can reroll ones on any conversation skill that you happen to roll a natural 1 on, making you much better at being consistent at passing those important skill checks. All of those make excellent picks, but of course you can use this build with any race, whatever you are intending to use for role-playing, but those are the most optimal from a pure mechanical perspective. Although I'm going to be focusing on a monoclass cleric here, I will mention that this build multiclasses extremely well, and a lot of the multiclasses are ones you would want to take at first level, so I'm just going to go over them very quickly. Bard, for example, gets you a ton of skill access because it has access to every skill, and the Friends cantrip and Bardic Inspiration to make you even better at dialogue checks. Sorcerer also gets you the Friends cantrip, but also gives you Constitution save proficiency, making you better at maintaining your concentration on spells, also gives you magic missile and shield for combat. Rogue gives you 2 additional skill expertises, so it makes you even better at passing certain skill checks. In particular, you could put expertise in sleight of hand here, for example, in order to be your party's lockpicking character, as well as providing all of the other things that this character already does. And 1 level of wizard fits perfectly with the Knowledge Cleric theme, because it will let you learn every wizard spell that you can find from a scroll, giving you a ton of additional utility. All of those make great options, but for this build, we're going to be focusing on a monoclass cleric. So, at first level, of course, we are going to be taking Knowledge Domain Cleric, and for our cantrip selection here, we are going to be taking Guidance, Thaumaturgy, because both of these will assist with our ability to perform in dialogue skills, and also are just incredible. Thaumaturgy gives us advantage on intimidation and performance checks, and Guidance is basically mandatory to play Baldur's Gate. It's the best spell in the game. Note also that Guidance is concentration and Thaumaturgy isn't, so you can precast one of these before entering conversation and still benefit from both of them, even though they're both on the same character. For our combat cantrip, we're going to take Produce Flame, but if you're on console, I would recommend taking Sacred Flame. Produce Flame is so annoying to cast on console that honestly, it's better to just save yourself the headache, even though it's the slightly more powerful spell. Both of these, by the way, will be replaced with Toll the Dead when patch 8 comes out and adds that as a cleric cantrip, most likely. For our Knowledge Domain subclass, we also get our 2 domain spells, and these include Sleep and Command. These are both very good spells to have as domain spells that are always prepared. Sleep isn't normally on the cleric spell list, so this is a very good early game combat spell, because there's no saving throw for Sleep, so when enemies don't have that many hit points, you can just disable a bunch of enemies with no saving throw at all, making fights in the early game much easier, and Command you would always have prepared anyways, so having it on your domain list just adds an extra spell prepared slot that you can use. For our ability score selection, there's actually a ton of different ways that we could set up this character, but because we want this to be our party face, we do want to have some charisma so that we can succeed more easily on dialogue skills. For that reason, we're going to take a slightly unusual build here because we want to put points into charisma. So we're going to take 14 in dexterity, 14 in constitution, 16 in wisdom, and 14 in charisma. 14 in charisma plus proficiencies in the dialogue skills plus thaumaturgy plus guidance will be plenty to allow you to succeed on very reliably on dialogue checks, so this should be more than enough. You can even drop down to 12 charisma and take a more usual build with like a 16 in dexterity, for example, or a 16 in constitution, and you'll be just fine in most dialogue checks, but I'm assuming that you want this character to be quite good at conversation skills because one of the strengths of Knowledge Clerics is that they can perform as a party face. Our last odd point, we're just going to stick wherever, it doesn't do anything, or you can also rearrange these to get rid of the odd number if odd numbers bother you. This character also benefits very, very strongly from using the Gloves of Dexterity because, of course, we want high dexterity for our initiative, for our armor class in medium armor, and so on. So, if you're using the Gloves of Dexterity, then I'm going to recommend taking 16 Wisdom, 14 Charisma, 16 in Constitution, and then you can leave your Dexterity at 8. With the remaining 4 points, you can put those into Intelligence to be better at the knowledge skills. And so this is what your ability score selection is going to look like after you get access to the Gloves of Dexterity, which makes you even better at dialogue checks, and also, of course, is going to optimize your character further with the 18 Dexterity, giving you a lot of additional combat power. For our skill selection here, we get both access to a bunch of skills that we can learn, but also we get access to 2 skills that we can have expertise in, 2 different knowledge skills. For those expertise skills, I'm going to recommend that you take Arcana and Religion. These are the 2 most common of the knowledge skills. They get rolled the most often during the game. Arcana especially gets rolled more than any other knowledge skill, and Religion has some very important late game rolls, so you're going to want expertise in these, though of course you can also put different points in for flavor. Notably, we are not taking proficiency in any persuasion skills because we're going to use our Knowledge of the Ages feature, which we'll talk about next level, to gain proficiency in all of the charisma skills. So we don't need to actually select any of those at level up. Alright, that's it for level 1. Let's move on to level 2. Character level 2, we get to unlock our Channel Divinity class feature, which for Knowledge Cleric is Knowledge of the Ages. This lets us gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. In this case, it's going to be Charisma skills, which will give us effectively proficiency in all of the dialogue skills, letting us succeed in dialogue in pretty much any way that we choose. For preference, of course, we're going to be using Intimidation or Persuasion because we have advantage on those from Thaumaturgy. But Knowledge of the Ages gives us access to any dialogue skill, so whatever the situation, we can use the one that feels most appropriate. This refreshes on a short rest. So if you know that you are not going to be engaging in dialogue during that short rest, you don't have to keep it locked permanently on charisma. You can use this for dexterity skills, you can use this for strength skills, and in addition to a strength potion, this character can shove enemies around using athletics. Generally speaking, it's pretty safe to just leave it on charisma, but it's totally reasonable to move it to another skill as well. You can also put it on wisdom to gain perception if you don't naturally have perception from your race in order to spot traps. So if you're out in the wilderness and not talking to people, I would put this on wisdom. If you are in town or are regularly engaging in dialogue, leave it on charisma. And for the most part, leaving it on charisma for 4 incredible skills is going to be the safe and excellent choice. For our prepared spells here, of course, we're going to take a very similar spell selection to most clerics. We're going to take Sanctuary, Bless, and Healing Word, as well as Guiding Bolt to be a damaging option. And then for our last spell, normally here you would prepare Command, but Knowledge Cleric always has Command because it's a domain spell, so you can pick up a utility spell like Create or Destroy Water, for example, and that will give you a lot of great options with your prepared spell list. At character level 3, we get access to second level spells, which for Knowledge Cleric include the always excellent Hold Person, again another spell that we would very likely just be preparing, as well as Calm Emotions. Calm Emotions in Baldur's Gate is a nice one to have access to, but because it's already on the Cleric spell list and only comes up in like 1 or 2 encounters, this is a little bit of a waste of a domain spell. But at least we don't have to remember to prepare it before we fight the Harpies. For our prepared spells at this level, we're going to be adding in Spiritual Weapon from level 2, because it's a very powerful combat spell. You can also prepare Enhanceability here, but at this level, spending a level 2 spell slot on a dialogue check is a very high cost, so if you do prepare Enhanceability, try to use it sparingly. You can get advantage on a lot of skill checks through Circumstance or by casting Thaumaturgy, so Enhanceability should be a last resort if you really, really need to cast a spell, or to succeed on a check, excuse me. At character level 4, we're going to take our first feat, and of course the feat that we take is going to be Alert. For pretty much any honor mode character, this is going to be the best feat to take at level 4, because bonuses to initiative are just so absolutely critical. That's especially true for clerics, and especially true for knowledge clerics, because we get access to so many excellent control spells through our domain spell access. Knowledge clerics want to go first so they can lock down enemies before they ever take a turn. This makes Alert just the best in slot feat because it's going to allow you to go before enemies, hit them with Slow, Hold Person, or Command, or any of the other debilitating spells that we get, and prevent them from acting at all, keeping your party members alive. For our cantrip at this level, Oh, it looks like I actually misclicked. I meant to take Thaumaturgy at level 1. I think I said I took Thaumaturgy, but we took, it looks like, Resistance instead. I just mixed up the pictures there. My bad. If you were confused about that, I apologize. But we're going to be taking Resistance at this level because the bonuses to saving throws can be very useful in some dialogue checks where you have to make a saving throw. Sometimes in dialogue, a circumstance or conversational enemy will cause you to make a saving throw, and Resistance does work on those saves, so having access to it is very helpful for some dialogue checks and story events throughout the game. Obviously, we should have taken it in the other order and started with Thaumaturgy. My apologies for that small mistake there. At character level 5, we get access to third level spells, which for every spellcaster is where your character gets extremely powerful, and that's especially true for clerics who get all of our core combat options, and even more true for knowledge clerics who get a bunch of really excellent domain spells. Now, Speak with Dead you get more or less for free from story events if you want it, but having access to this ritual spell, it's a ritual so it doesn't cost you a spell slot, is good if you didn't take the story events that get you access to Speak with Dead. And Slow is a very powerful but situational combat spell. That makes it perfect to have as a domain spell, because you don't have to actively choose to use a resource to prepare this spell. But for boss fights where Slow is good, it's excellent. So just having the option to activate Slow is always good. This is also a spell that's not normally on the cleric spell list. And what you want in a domain spell is almost always to be gaining spells that you don't normally have access to. Slow is a really top tier one to gain access to because it's powerful but situational, making it perfect as a domain spell. For our prepared spells at this level, we're going to be picking up Spirit Guardians. This is, of course, going to be our main combat ability that we're using for most of our damage dealing, as well as a lot of our control if we're using the Radiating Orb item set. And this just is Cleric's sort of mainstay in Baldur's Gate, is running around with Spirit Guardians. Knowledge Clerics are no exception. This does a ton of great damage and also can lock down enemies with the Radiating Orb items, and Glyph of Warding for a non-concentration damage spell. This also provides AoE controls through the sleep effect or the ice circle from Glyph of Warding, as well as being really excellent area of effect damage. At character level 6, we get another Knowledge Domain ability, and that ability is Read Thoughts. This allows you to use Detect Thoughts, just like the spell, which I think it's this ability that's why people are often not that excited about Knowledge Cleric, because this is a fairly weak ability, although still very useful in some dialogues and stuff throughout the game. You usually have other ways to get access to this, but it's nice to have it baked into the character, but won't help you in combat the way some of the other more combat-focused domains do. That being said, the fact that this ability is somewhat weak doesn't matter that much, because Knowledge Cleric's real strength is in its spell access and skill access, which we already have access to from earlier levels. At character level 7, we get 4th level spells, including 2 new domain spells. The first and more important of these is Confusion, which again is not normally on the cleric spell list, and is another extremely powerful but relatively situational combat spell. Confusion is notable for a couple reasons. One, it's a big AoE control spell, and that's always very powerful, especially for a cleric, who don't actually get hard lockdown like Confusion that readily. But 2, it doesn't hit your allies. If your allies and your enemies are all mixed up together on the battlefield, Confusion will only ever hit enemies, allowing you to apply control to a large group of enemies, even if the battlefield is confused and uncertain, so it has that usage there as well. We also get Autoluke's Resilient Sphere, which is extremely situational. There's a couple encounters in the game where this can be useful, mostly to protect an NPC who is otherwise in danger of dying. If you have an uncontrollable ally, then you can encase them in a Resilient Sphere, and then they won't die. But this is, so it's a nice little bonus to have, but certainly not something that you're going to get that excited about. For our prepared spells at this level, we're adding in Guardian of Faith, as well as Confusion that we already got, and those 2 additional combat spells are going to be really powerful for us. Guardian of Faith is some of the best damage in the game. It's 60 damage for a 4th level spell, which is a pretty good ratio, and also it has the hidden passive of being massive. It's just big. And so you can park this thing's giant butt in a doorway to prevent enemies from moving through it, and it can effectively stun a lot of enemies because it fills so much space, and they can get stuck on the other side of it and be unable to attack your important characters. So Guardian of Faith, very powerful. For our second level 4 spell, prepared, we're going to take Freedom of Movement. This, despite being a until long rest buff, isn't something that we're going to cast at the start of the day. This is just a nice situational spell to have. If our allies get stunned, you can snap them out of the stun, which is incredibly valuable in a lot of fights in the game. Stun is an incredibly dangerous condition, so this makes a great panic button to have access to. And then if you have to use it, then you do benefit from the buffs that it gives you for the rest of the adventuring day. But for the most part, this is because we are going to be spending most of our spell slots on Spirit Guardians, Glyph of Warding, and Guardian of Faith, so as well as Confusion and Slow. So having Freedom of Movement as a backup option for when we really need it is more important than having a more generally applicable spell, because the ones we have are already more generally applicable. At character level 8, we are getting another spellcasting feature, and this is Potent Spellcasting, allowing us to add our wisdom to the damage we deal with cleric cantrips. This is a nice little boost. Sometimes clerics will be spamming cantrips in fights. A lot of your fights, especially as a knowledge cleric, will look like you land a powerful control spell, lock down the enemies, and then you don't really want to spend spell slots on enemies who are just trapped in confusion, or who are slowed and not very dangerous, or who you've locked down with Glyph of Warding, etc., so you will often just be spamming out cantrips for the rest of the fight. Potent spellcasting makes you better at that, and this will especially be good when clerics get a good damage cantrip with the upcoming update, hopefully. And then, for our feat selection, of course we're going to take an ability improvement to just boost our wisdom. If you're really struggling with maintaining concentration, you can take Warcaster here, but increasing the save DC of your spells is very important, even more so for Knowledge Domain Clerics, because we have a lot of saving throw-based spells that we really, really want to land. At level 9, we get 5th level spells, and again, get 2 new domain spells from our Knowledge Cleric domain. Here we get Dominate Person and Telekinesis. Telekinesis is another one that is not normally available to clerics, and this is another very powerful but fairly situational spell. Telekinesis can be used in arenas where there are hazards to hurl enemies off into the abyss, to chuck them into hazardous areas that you're creating with your other spells, and therefore is, again, very powerful when it's good, but not one that you would often want to go into most adventuring days having prepared, because you'll only use it occasionally. Having it as a domain spell means that you don't have to make that decision and can use it when it's good and not use it when it's not. So this is another great spell to get that clerics don't normally get that gives them a lot of solid options. Dominate Person is generally speaking fairly weak, so I wouldn't recommend spending a 5th level spell slot on casting this, though it can be fun to use if you get the opportunity. For our prepared spells at this level, we are going to be adding in Banishment from level 4. This is situational because it works very well on enemies with low charisma saving throws, and is very good against them because it targets a charisma save, a rare save, and some enemies have very weak charisma saves. Banishment is very good against them. We're also going to add in utility from earlier levels. Aid can be cast to give our whole party an HP boost. And Mass Healing Word can be used to buff our whole group of allies as a bonus action with the buff on heal items, or get if a bunch of allies have gone down to an AoE spell, then you can get them back on their feet with Mass Healing Word. At level 10, we get Divine Intervention, which of course is a very powerful ability. Usually you're going to be using this to summon the weapon. You can of course also spec hirelings into clerics to get all the Divine Interventions if you want to, but the special mace that you get from Divine Intervention is very useful, so that's what I would generally be using that for. And for our cantrips here, of course we tragically cannot take True Strike, so we're going to pick up Blade Ward. Even in the late game, Blade Ward can be useful if your character gets way out of position. You can tank for an extra turn if you're like surrounded by enemies and just need to delay for a turn. So having access to this as a combat option, even in the late game, can be pretty useful. At level 11, we get 6th level spells, and of course there are no domain spells at 6th level, but this still gives us extremely powerful options for our cleric. If we're using one of the items that lets us refresh spell slots, then you can cast both Hero's Feast and Planar Ally at the beginning of the day for massive buffs to your party's effectiveness over the course of the day. Even if you aren't refreshing your spell slots, Hero's Feast is a tremendous boost to your party's effectiveness, especially in the late game, where a lot of enemies where immunity to Frightened is very useful, and there's a lot of wisdom saves, so having advantage on all of them is really, really good. You can cast this from a camp follower as well, but it's good enough to cast even if it costs the 6th level spell slot from a character coming with you because you don't like using camp casting. As well, the Planar Ally for the Jinni or the Deva is extremely good. Also, those summons are both extraordinarily powerful and will boost your combat effectiveness for the entire adventuring day. And Blade Barrier is a very powerful damaging spell that can be used to just win an encounter outright. Typically, with Cleric, you're going to be casting them in order: Hero's Feast, then Planar Ally. Then if you still have 6th level spell slots left over after you've used your spell refreshing items, you'll be using Blade Barrier for combat spells. But generally, that's the priority order. For our prepared spells, of course, at this level, we're going to be adding those in so that we can actually cast them. So it'll look something along these lines for your prepared spell list going into level 12. Finally, at character level 12, we get our last feat, and the final feat that we are going to take is, of course, an ability improvement to bump our wisdom up to 20. Again, if you have used story events to gain more wisdom, or if you are not finding that you're casting that many spells with save DCs, or you just have a lot of save DC items on this character, you can pick up Warcaster here, because advantage on saving throw on concentration checks is very useful. You have a lot of great concentration spells, so Warcaster is pretty good. Typically, I prefer to use positioning and just the control spells themselves to prevent my character from taking damage and having to make concentration checks. Because, of course, an enemy who's locked down by a control spell can't hit you, so you don't have to worry about it breaking your concentration. But Warcaster is very good if you are finding concentration to be an issue for your character. Then that's what I would recommend. But generally speaking, most of the time you're going to be best off just increasing your save DCs by boosting your wisdom to the maximum. Alright, my friends, that's the Knowledge Cleric, but of course, we can improve the character further with items, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, we operate in a few distinct phases and get access to some of the most powerful items in the game. So, firstly, in the early game, before you get access to the Gloves of Dexterity, the gloves you're using are almost certainly the Hell Rider's Pride. This is going to let you heal your allies and apply buffs to them, which is very powerful. Then you'll have the Whispering Promise ring as well, so that when you heal allies, you gain the benefits of both Bless and Blade Ward on those characters. You can do this by casting Healing Word as a bonus action, or throwing a potion at them for an AoE buff. And that, of course, saves you spell slots and increases the power level of your allies enormously. Then you will probably want to swap to the Gloves of Dexterity, though another option, in order to have higher dex and just sort of fix your attributes from the somewhat awkward split that we took at early levels, though another option is to swap to the Luminous Gloves and have the character lean into the Radiating Orb build. If you want to maintain high charisma, you're going to be a little bit lower in terms of dex and con, but that's totally fine. 14 in each of those is totally fine for a cleric. Because you're going to be locking down enemies so powerfully with Radiating Orbs. Of course, the best armor, regardless of whether you're using the Luminous Gloves, is going to be the Luminous Armor, because Radiating Orbs from your Spirit Guardians are so incredibly powerful. These cause enemies to take a -1 penalty per orb on them to their attack rolls, which will quickly stop enemies from ever being able to hit you. In addition to that, the Coruscation Ring and the Callous Glow Ring will stack even more Radiating Orbs, and if you're doing that build, then the Boots of Stormy Clamor will allow you to inflict Reverberation at the same time as you are inflicting Radiating Orbs to an enemy, knocking them over. That's the core combo of the just walking around cleric, and of course Knowledge Cleric is no exception to that extremely powerful combination. Some items that are more specific to Knowledge Cleric, the Warped Headband of Intellect does extremely well for you because you are going to be making a lot of knowledge checks, so just having 17 in intelligence also lets you recover these points and put them into strength or whatever for a little more carry weight and jump distance. Just makes you just better at dialogue skills, and of course a Knowledge Cleric who actually has intelligence to know things with just feels a little bit more thematic. And then, of course, in the later game, boosts to your save DC are the most important thing that you are going to be looking for. Items like Ketheric's Shield, which is the best shield for you, that boost your spell save DC are going to be critical in the mid to end game to make sure that enemies are actually failing saves against your spells. A more defensive alternative, or before you get this, is the Adamantine Shield. Immunity to critical hits will help you both in terms of... will help you in several ways. Firstly, when enemies have Radiating Orb penalties to hit you, critical hits are the only way they can hit you. The Adamantine Shield prevents that from happening. Secondly, your concentration saves are determined by the damage you take. Removing critical hits means that your concentration saves will be easier. And thirdly, of course, this character is just going to be taking the occasional attack, because you'll tend to be playing a little further forward, so immunity to critical hits can prevent damage spikes and prevent you from just losing combats. The best weapon, as with pretty much any spellcaster, is Markaheshkir, but a weapon that improves your spell save DCs, any staff that improves your spell save DCs, is going to be excellent. An alternative option for a more supporting character is the Devotee's Mace that you get from Divine Intervention, because that gives you a healing aura that you can use to keep your party members alive, and that's also very, very useful on into the late game. Other than that, you're pretty much looking for spell save DC items. Anything that improves your armor class is also good on this character. So armor class, spell save DC, and these unique combinations of items. One other specific item that I highly recommend on this character is the Amulet of Misty Step. We don't naturally get access to Misty Step, and this character, and every character in Baldur's Gate should have this, so either carry Scrolls of Misty Step or wear this amulet to make sure that you have an emergency repositioning tool for when you need it. A Misty Step is incredibly powerful and very, very useful. Every single character should always strive to have access to it. Alright, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this look at the Knowledge Cleric, one of the least used subclasses in Baldur's Gate, and I hope that you have fun playing a main character cleric, whether as a Shadowheart Origin run, or for yourself, or just enjoying knowing more things than everybody else does. As always, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. As always, it is the best way to help out creators is to engage, because that's what the YouTube algorithm cares about. It just likes you to push buttons. Of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides, especially with the upcoming patch and other strategy game analysis, and I'll catch you next time.